Hey guys, welcome back to T-Bones Tech. In today's video, we are going to be reviewing the Canon 50mm f1.4 lens. This lens is a step above the Canon 50mm f1.8 that we reviewed in a previous video. The price of this 50mm f1.8 is around $110, and the price of this f1.4 is around $330. So this lens costs 3 times the price of the f1.8. So in today's video, we are going to be finding out if the f1.4 is worth triple the money of the f1.8. So first off, and probably most importantly, we're going to talk about this camera's aperture. It has a massive f1.4 aperture, which is going to allow 2/3 of a stop more light into your camera sensor than the f1.8 lens is going to. And because the f1.4 aperture is letting so much more light into your camera sensor, you're going to be able to use lower ISOs, giving you cleaner images, and it's going to really come in handy in low light situations. This is an EF lens, and that means that it is designed to work with Canon's full frame cameras like the Canon 1DX, the Canon 5D Mark IV, or the Canon 6D. And it'll also work with cameras with APS-C size sensors like the Canon 80D and all of Canon's Rebel series cameras. But on those cameras, there is going to be a 1.6 times crop factor. This lens weighs 290 grams, and that's a little bit over a half a pound. It also has a mount for a lens hood. The official OEM hood by Canon is going to run you around $25, but you can easily pick up a third-party one on Amazon for around $6, which I definitely recommend doing. A really cool feature of this lens is that it has full-time manual focusing, so even if your camera is in autofocus mode, you can still twist the focus ring without doing any damage to the motor and manually focus the lens, again, even in automatic focus mode. This lens is actually made in Japan. A lot of Canon's cheaper lenses are going to be made in Malaysia now, but again, this lens is made in Japan, and all of Canon's best quality lenses are indeed made in Japan. As far as autofocusing speed goes, this lens does have USM autofocusing, but again, this lens is relatively old, so it's not going to be quite as fast as Canon's newest USM autofocusing systems. It's not too slow, but it's not incredibly fast either. Its USM autofocusing system also isn't the best for video. This lens came out, autofocusing during video wasn't even a thing that Canon offered, and because of that, it's going to have some issues when focusing, especially when shooting wide open at f1.8 because you're shooting at such a shallow depth of field. As you guys can see here, it's kind of struggling to focus on some of these flowers as I'm moving the camera around this tree. It's kind of hunting and pecking for focus, and then once it finally does find focus, it really comes in very nice and sharp. As you guys could probably tell from that last video, this lens also does not have any image stabilizer built into it. And because of that, handheld video is definitely going to be a little bit shaky, and that shakiness is even going to be more enhanced on an APS-C body because we're shooting at the equivalent of 80mm rather than 50. So that's definitely something to keep in mind when thinking about picking up this lens. But then again, most videographers like me tend to manually focus all their shots anyways. If autofocus during video is very important to you, I would definitely recommend picking up the cheaper f1.8 STM version. Canon's STM autofocusing system is absolutely fantastic for video. As far as build quality goes, this lens definitely doesn't have the best build quality. The outside of the lens is definitely made out of a plastic material. It does feel a lot better than the plastic fantastic f1.8, but this lens is definitely not built out of the best high quality materials. The focus ring on a brand new f1.4 feels very smooth when focusing, but as the lens gets used, it's going to feel more jittery and rough, but doesn't seem to affect image quality. It also has a focus distance indicator here on the top. When focusing with this lens, the front element is going to extend. This lens, of course, has a 50mm focal length, which is really great for just walking around and taking street photography, and it is a really awesome focal length on a full frame camera. But if we put this lens on a Canon camera with an APS-C size sensor, we are going to have a 1.6 times crop factor. So this 50mm lens is going to have an equivalent of 80mm on an APS-C camera. That's actually going to be a great focal length for portraiture, but not so much as a walking around standard lens. The lens mount is all metal, as you guys can see here, and also has an 8-bladed aperture. Typically, the more aperture blades we have on a lens, the smoother and more circular our bokeh is going to be, especially if the lens is stopped down. And now it's time for a bokeh test. The first video here was shot on a full frame Canon 6D with the aperture wide open at f1.4, and the camera was on a slider slowly panning away from the lights, and as we slowly pan away, you can see that the bokeh is getting bigger and bigger. With the aperture stopped down to f1.8, we can see more of an octagonal style bokeh, and it's not going to be quite as nice and circular as f1.4. Now let's take a look at f2.8, and here at f2.8 we can see the bokeh isn't nearly as big as it was at f1.4, f1.8, and we're getting more strong octagonal looking bokeh. And then here is all three of them together. The far left is going to be wide open at f1.4, the middle is f1.8, and all the way to the right is f2.8. So here's the difference between apertures on this lens. And I have to say, f1.8 really does look nice. Its minimum focusing distance is 0.35 meters, so about half a meter, and 1.5 feet. So you're going to have to be somewhat far away from your subjects to be able to focus on them. Alright, now it's time to check for sharpness and vignetting. So first we're going to zoom in here to the middle of the screen, and we're going to check for sharpness here wide open at f1.4, and here at f1.4 in the middle we can see it's really not super sharp at all. It's a little bit blurry and just not very sharp. Let's stop down our aperture to f1.8, and here at f1.8 we can see a whole bunch more detail here in the bricks, and I did focus here on the bricks for those of you wondering, and that means that when shooting this lens wide open at f1.4 we're really not going to get extremely sharp results. So even though we do get those really nice looking background blurs at f1.4, it's going to really be sharp here at f1.8. Now let's stop down our aperture one more time to f2.8, and here at f2.8 we can see we gain even more detail than we did at f1.8, but both these apertures seem to be relatively sharp. Now let's stop down our aperture one more stop to f4, and here at f4 we're actually really not gaining too much detail in the center at all versus f2.8. Now that we took a look at sharpness in the middle of the screen, let's take a look at sharpness in the corners. So we're going to zoom in here and check for our sharpness in the corners of the screen. And here we can see at f1.4 they are not sharp at all. They are very blurry. Let's stop down our aperture to f1.8. And here at f1.8 they're still, again, very blurry, not very sharp. Let's stop down our aperture again to f2.8. And here at f2.8 we're finally starting to see relatively sharp results here in the corners. Let's stop down our aperture to f4, and here at f4 we get the sharpest possible results over here in the corners. So that's actually pretty disappointing that the lens performs this poorly at f1.4. It's almost like there's a smudge in the lens, which I guarantee you there wasn't. But f4.0 on the other hand is extremely sharp and looks really nice in the corners. As far as vignetting goes, at f1.4 vignetting really doesn't seem to be too bad on these pictures. At f1.8 it doesn't seem to make really much a difference, so vignetting really isn't too bad on this lens from my particular test results. Now it's time to take a look at what this lens is able to produce with an APS-C camera, and I'll actually go back here to show you what a full frame looks like, and then this is the crop factor on an APS-C camera using the exact same lens with a tripod at the exact same location. So first we'll zoom in here to the center to check for sharpness, and again, same idea, we're not really getting extremely sharp results in the center. At wide open at f1.4, stopping down our aperture to f1.8, we can see it definitely gets sharper, and then stopping down our aperture to f2.8, we're getting even sharper results. Now we'll stop our aperture down one last time to f4, and here at f4 there's really not a big difference between f4 and f2.8. Now we are going to zoom into the corners and check for sharpness. So here in the corners we can see at f4 it doesn't seem to be as blurry as it did on a full frame camera. So in theory, when using a crop camera and zooming into the middle of the lens, we're not going to deal with as much vignetting or dullness in the corners. And here we can definitely see it's not quite as blurry as it was on a full frame camera. At f1.4, stopping down our aperture to f1.8, we can see that the picture definitely seems to get a little bit sharper, and stopping down our aperture from f1.8 to f2.8, we see a dramatic difference. So again, here's f2.8 and here is f1.8, and that's an absolutely huge difference in sharpness between these two pictures. Now let's stop down our aperture one last time to f4, and here at f4, I think we're getting just a little bit more detail here in the corners than at f2.8, but once again at f2.8, this lens is definitely razor sharp. I think overall this is a very good lens. It's definitely a lot better than the Canon f1.8 lens, but again it does cost 3 times the price. So probably for the average person I would say just stick with your f1.8. It's very cheap and the image quality again is very sharp, but if you have the extra money and don't mind spending it, I would definitely say that this is a solid lens to pick up. But that's all I got for you guys in this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up down below. And of course, make sure to hit the subscribe button and then you'll be notified every single time I put a brand new video to this YouTube channel. Again, thank you all so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you all in the next one.